welcome. So we go from the multi-talented musical elf Elvira to the ogre concert producer here. My name is Orvar Säfström, for you who don't live in Scandinavia. I'm a symphony orchestra, game music concert producer with score and joystick and other productions. But I'm not here today to talk about my concerts. I'm here to talk about the wonderful and heart-wrenching music of Alan Wake 2.
Back to the beginning. We all come to a story with hopes and expectations, looking for an answer. Sometimes it would be better to live with that hope without ever knowing the full story. In a horror story, there are only victims and monsters. And the trick is not to end up as either. But trapped by the genre, we are all ripped to pieces along the way. This is not the story I hoped it would be. This is not the ending I wanted. This story will eat us alive. This story is a monster. And monsters wear many faces.
So let's give a true rock star welcome to Petri Alanko. Well, I figured we'd sort of move backwards in this talk and start right here, right now.
Okay.
Congratulations, last night.
Thank you.
Best
Thank you.
music.
I'm still recovering.
Together with best game and best art, but still, several awards, accolades, fan favorite. Were you expecting this sort of reception, or were you a skeptic at heart?
I was skeptic at first because what we did with Alan Wake 1, we sort of get overrun by Red Dead Redemption back in the day. And it was a bitter bullet to bite, I have to confess. But throughout the years, quite a lot of cult following appeared, and every now and then somebody asked me whether I could do a special version of Welcome to Bright Falls for the wedding, for instance, and things like that. I didn't expect much, but every now and then I felt like it was, how would I say, Twitter army of bots appeared. But
all of a sudden, a bunch of algorithms pretending to like your music and game.
yeah. But then I thought they were bots. But for instance, when I visited Gamescom back in the day, was it like 2017 or something like that, I finally realized that, okay, this something 3428011 was actually a real human being and was actually a game fan and kept asking really hard questions. So it wasn't like an overnight thing. And well, it started sinking into my brain little by little. And when we finally managed to do something final and it was released, it was quite nerve-wracking actually to wait for the embargo to be lifted.
Now you've done several games before, but what's special about bringing a fairly old, by game industry standards, game back to life again? I mean, how did you discuss the musical motifs and soundscapes refreshing it, but still keeping it within the Alan Wake musical world, so to speak.
Yeah, well, obviously we couldn't redo what we had done with the first one. And instead, Mr. Wake had spent a good 13 years in a very bad place. So the normal orchestration would be out of hands anyway. Luckily, we had the second protagonist in the game, and we were able to use her as a so-called innocent bystander who was still a protagonist. And sort of repeat what we had done with Alan Wake 1 with her, but with a different point of view, different twist. And I think what we found there, the two worlds between, I mean, the dark place and the real world, they sort of communicated really nicely throughout the game. And at some point they started mixing together when the protagonists found a means or a way, a channel to talk to each other, to communicate. And when the worlds united for a while, I mean the Sonic worlds united for a while, it felt like, okay, now this is clicking, now this is producing something new. The evil spread from the dark place to normal world and to control and and everything. But yeah, it was interesting. And
how much was this a collaborative effort? Because everyone sort of dreams about, everyone helping each other, but how involved were you in discussions about, things that you're mentioning now from a sound and music perspective and saying, well, if we do this, then the music can work this way? Or do you just get handed things? This is what we're going to do, make it work?
No, we actually, it wasn't dictation, so to speak. And I did have a few tricks in my mind which I wanted to try out. And luckily they gave me time to, explore those depths and caverns. But I would say that what is there in the game, I'm willing to say that it's 100% mine, and only like some stylistic guidance that was given by the director or writers. Those sort of pointed me towards the right direction at times. Luckily, I was never too much off from the course, so it was really, how would I say, it was more supporting role rather than, don't go there, do this.
How much of it is for you about just serving the game? I mean, as a game music composer, I'm very well aware of the fact that some game music is almost written to stand on its own legs. It's epic main themes, and it's suitable for concerts or soundtrack releases, while you're working with huge amounts of music, soundscapes, things that are very, very tightly integrated into the game. Is that something you even consider, or is it always about serving the game and the story?
Well, despite the fact that I'm doing what I personally call a side product for the main product, but in reality, how I treat the music pieces is that they need to work as is by themselves. And even though if somebody listens to the soundtrack album at some point, oh, sorry, it was released last week. Woo, finally. Shit, that took long. Sorry. So when somebody listens to the soundtrack, they probably are able to enjoy it as an album instead of sort of connecting their minds and thoughts into the game. Of course, it is best enjoyed with the game, so to speak, but I'm always trying to create something whole instead of something needing something, because my past is with pop music and classical music, and I've done record producing and daily pop composing and this and that. So it comes from there, and I like concept albums myself. We're talking like Tangerine Dream or things like that. Anywho, so it was an exploration of ideas that turned out to be good exploration, which turned out to be a kind of good whole connection between tracks that were meant to be for different kind of people within the game. But it still sounds like a whole.
How much of this process is experimenting with sounds and ideas? How much is writing, specifically just writing music and themes, and how much is actual recording and producing the music?
Well, that's a long story, but I try to cut it short. I always begin with recording a raw material package, which contains a lot of instruments or sounds that I think might work in the game as an instrument. And when I start editing those raw sounds, I usually start hearing things when, of course, when you're trying to loop some screeching sound, you're trying to find perfect looping point, and all of a sudden it brings a melody to your mind. And next thing you realize that 2 hours has gone and you're still looping the same thing, but you've been playing quite a lot with that sound. And usually when that happens, I know that, okay, this is something that I need to, record into the box in order to, not let it go. Percentage, with Alan Wake, I say it was 40% of sound design, 10% of going through the old backups, and 50% of composing. And the raw material recording is basically everything that I did for the thing, and the rest was done in the box. So it may vary a little from project to project, but this was such a special project to me that that's how I dealt with the time.
And how much of this music was sort of created as is? This is going to be a track for this is going to work for this scene, and how much of it is that you create lots of music and then sort of place it out in the game?
I always do first a few concept tracks which sort of glue together the feeling of the game in the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end. And I usually use those for, in case I run into a writer's block or something like that, I use those concept tracks to return my brain into the state which it was in when I started the project. So when I kind of write myself into a dead end, I start listening to the stuff I've done years earlier for the project, of course. So it works like a time machine, and it works like a backup even, and it speeds up the process greatly, because when you doubt, you have to have a tool to return your tracks to a proper direction. And those concept tracks were used throughout the game, more or less. Actually, the opening track, that was one of the concept tracks, like almost directly without any editing, actually. And then there are a few others in the game, and one of them being in the end credits as well. So
that sort of ties the whole project together for you as well, so keeping you focused.
Yeah. When something lasts like 3 or 4 years or 5 years or something like that, you really need to be focused all the time.
Can you tell us a little bit about the special techniques and equipment used here, like the apprehension engine, for instance, or the Mega Marvin?
Yeah, well, I recorded a lot of stuff from those boxes. I used to have a microphonic sound box, which is basically a tiny version of apprehension engine, like 20 centimeters by 15 centimeters and about 10 centimeters tall. And it sort of started blinking in my head that maybe if we had a bigger version of this, but it was so heavily expensive that I couldn't afford it. But luckily, Mr. Ville Sorsa at Remedy was so helpful that he also was very enthused about the machine. So Remedy purchased one, and they also purchased quite a lot of other interesting things, such as the Mega Marvin, which is basically a large metallic, I would say it's a cowbell from hell. Well, it sounds like that. But it could sound quite a lot of, well, something else as well. And then I broke a double bass and burnt a piano and
You're like the Jerry Lee Lewis of the Finnish game.
Jerry Lee Lewis is my bitch. I mean, I'm sorry. I value Jerry Lee Lewis a lot, and especially his piano playing. But yeah, we really treated badly the instruments because there's this psychological thing. Human brain and ear has accustomed to a certain way of playing, and it's more or less safe when it's played in a contemporary way. But when something happens to the instrument and it's on the verge of breaking down, or it's breaking down, or it's burning, or the fire alarm is off and the fire brigade is arriving and so forth, that's where the brain starts to think that, okay, this is really annoying and this is really consuming and this is bothering and everything. And using that effect as a basis of some of the instrumentation, it feels really undervaluing is probably the right way to put it, but it's undervaluing to say that you need less tracks when you have enough that material. When enough material is creeping down your neck and trying to strangle you, sort of, it feels like you're in the games world much deeper than you would be with a, if you were just playing nicely the piano. When you hit a piano with a jackhammer or hammer or even something larger, drop stones into it, the sounds the instrument produce, they aren't anything we have sort of gotten used to. So yeah, psychology has a big role in that one.
There's a lot of sort of soundscapes in the soundtrack, reverb, different sort of room timbres. Are those all effects, or did you also experiment with how you recorded, where you recorded things?
Yeah. Actually, the piano thing was recorded in a large industrial hall, but there is also quite a huge set of impulse responses I took from Marvin and Apprehension Engine and the poor piano.
So if anyone needs an IR from a burning piano, they email you.
Yeah. Or anything that makes things sound slightly bitter or mangled or whatnot, then I guess I might have the answer. But
you mentioned before the sort of duality of the two characters, the two protagonists, and how that musically could connect or clash. When you bring in the different worlds as well, I mean, how did you try to keep that sort of balance stable musically? Because it could really go off in all directions, I bet you imagine.
Well, yeah, I did quite a few tests with that and decided that it's best to start luring the dark place in with impulse responses. So first, all the natural reverbs or natural ambiances were sort of taken down, and instead of them, stuff that I had recorded with broken cymbals and things like that were brought in. Of course, they also caused quite a lot of resonances because that's the nature of impulse responses and convolution. But those are really easy to treat because they usually are very stable frequencies that are being produced, unless you start jacking up with, for instance, impulse response playback rate or something like that. Then you need to also automate the EQ and everything. But I don't recommend that.
Yeah,
I did it.
Okay.
I wouldn't go there anymore.
You wouldn't go there anymore. You didn't only create a lot of music for Alan Wake 2, you also brought in other music. I figured we'll look at one clip that I think a lot of Alan Wake players found very charming to have it included. So let's roll the next clip.
Okay then. catchy tune.
So we can lower the volume there a little bit. Who came up with the idea that we're going to have Finnish karaoke in Alan Wake 2?
I think it was Sam Lake, the creative director. At first, when he suggested that, I was like, "You gotta be kidding, right? Aren't you?" But no, he wasn't. And after a while, the idea started to, the sound even better and better. And of course, he was right. He has these marvelous ideas, which sort of feel like coffee hour jokes, but. When you look into his face and see his eyes and you realize that, hey,
He's serious.
Yeah, there's something to it actually, but everybody knows that the karaoke is basically it's I don't know.
I love karaoke, especially in Finland. But
okay,
that's me. But
okay, then it's very useful form of culture in that case.
But how did you approach it? I mean, how did you create the scene?
Well, we were discussing with Sam Lake about what to do with this one because we had done a Finnish tango in Control. What else was like hitting the dance halls and places where people play music back in the 60s and 70s, and of course tango was one, and then was a wave of different kind of guitar bands. It's a bit like shoegazing music back in the day. Like they tried to mimic something like Renegades or the classic guitar combos or something like that, and they even built amplifiers themselves and things like that. And the music, of course, because it was Finnish music, it was all about how everything is miserable
and heartache and vodka.
Yes, and my wife has left me and everything is shit, and I would like to kill myself, but I don't have a gun and things like this. So that's Finnish culture in a nutshell. And we're building on that.
Now, you told me yesterday that you're working on the DLCs right now for Alan Wake 2, and that you're actually bringing in some more Finnish artists from outside. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
Or is it secret?
More or less secret, but I can spill the beans that we are entering what hit Finland after the guitar bands, and it was rockabilly. So prepare for the worst. I mean, like properly worse. I used to have a schoolmate who was into Cramps and Meteors. Nobody knows. Okay, cool. That's cool enough. But they were like, if you mix punk with rockabilly, you get psychobilly. And I decided to mix psychobilly with surf guitars as well. So it's, I don't know, maybe it's a new style that we sort of started there. But wait until you hear. Don't blame me beforehand. And if it sounds shit, don't tell me. Keep it to yourself.
So what about the audience reaction now that the game has been out, and especially people who love the old game? What sort of reactions have you gotten from the fans?
It's overwhelming and surprising, to say the least. I'm humbled. That's probably the word I'm looking for. But it feels insanely good that somebody is enjoying both the game and the music and the characters and the story so much that they sort of share the love publicly. I'm insanely grateful. That's the top feeling, and when you go deeper, there are lots of other tones to it as well, but they all are positive, and I wouldn't expect it, really. I knew that we had done something right because we enjoyed it ourselves, and I liked the music myself, and Sam liked the manuscript of the game, and all the characters were wonderful, and so forth, but nobody had really any expectation. It could be hit or it could be a miss.
As always in the game world, more or less, yeah.
And especially with such a niche game such as this one. This isn't like a whole family happy-do-we, hello baby game.
Hello Baby game. That's a new genre. We're going to go for that one next year. You mentioned a little bit earlier about being a performing musician and being in the pop world and the orchestra world. And I thought I'd just touch on that a little bit. Can you mention some of your earlier projects like Lowland or Black Hole or?
Oh yeah, I used to do daily pop. Like I was a house writer for Warner Chappell for quite a long time and did all kinds of miserable artists. Sorry. and like, you know, what was then on the radio and when Napster and similar services hit the music industry, all the budgets started to go down.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided maybe it's time
Maybe we should do something different.
Yes. Yeah.
But then you've also worked with other artists like Nightwish and things like that, right?
Yeah. If you hear a gig intro on Nightwish gig, it's probably made by yours truly. And done several remixes for them. And when they did release the movie, what was it called? Imaginarium. I basically took their then album's tracks and made a remix of every song in order to create a score. It was a 11-month remix job, basically. And I'm never going to do that again.
So how would you compare working with music in the game industry to working sort of in the popular music industry as you were?
In gaming world, it's much easier because people are more coherent and they have clear plans and they know what they are doing. And I'm referring to Finnish music business, and you all know how it can be. You've seen the Eurovisions like many times over. Yeah. We've had everything, unfortunately, and it doesn't exactly help our how would I say reputation internationally. But yeah, things are very different in gaming world, and I was back in long ago. I was pleasantly surprised when I realized that hey, there is a form of industry that uses music in a much more professional way, and they have formulated their thoughts and needs very precisely, and also. When somebody promises something, they keep their promises.
Were you into games before that, or did you?
Yes.
Yeah. You were an old gamer, and then you just.
Yes, my first computer was Sinclair Spectrum 48K, and then I got a Commodore 64, yay, and Amiga 500, Amiga 2000, Atari, which was my first, actually musical second. Computer sequencer, and then came Atari Falcon, and then, well, it's Macintoshes ever since.
Yeah. So, working with a team, that's one thing I wanted to touch on as well. I mean, how much of a dictator are you on a soundtrack like this, and how much of it is a collaborative effort as far as the music and audio department goes?
I am not a dictator. I'm more or less like a team member, let's put it this way. And I probably am something where something is originated or drawn from, but I'm more supporting the guys when they want to do something new with my stem files. I'm not the one who says, no, you're not going to go there, or try to hinder them or stop them doing what they are good at. And instead, it's great to hear somebody take your beloved kid and dress it differently, for instance. It feels very, how would I say? I'm looking for a correct word, translating Finnish into English, and right now I can't find the right word, but yeah, it's nice. And I strongly suggest everybody do that. Every composer should do that. Let go of your material. Let somebody else do something to a material. You will be very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it reminds me of sort of the attitude of Trent Reznor, who's just released stems and do things with my stuff. And
yeah. That's what I basically have done. Of course, some things I was very adamant to keep as is, but they were only a few exceptions, and I had good excuses to do that.
Because one thing that I really feel is important for the entire mood of the Alan Wake experience is that it's not all horror. The fact that the music is allowed to be sad or beautiful and creating a contrast with the horrific things going on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, because I have this theory that if you put horror on top of horror, you don't get twice the horror or horror squared. Instead, you get the square root of horror, basically, because it feels
Forced.
yes, and artificial and everything. But a good example is you probably have heard of horror movie Hereditary. And there's the ending and the beautiful...
Spoiler alert, but that's okay. We're all professionals here.
the beautiful choir towards the end of the movie, where the guy realizes that, oh shit, I'm going to be the vessel of a demon. And his mom has just sawn her head off with a piano string, and there's this beautiful choir. That's the contrast, and that leaves things into people's mind. It leaves a print there forever. It's so horrific and yet so beautiful at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's the emotional aberration that I'm always after when it comes to really important scenes in a game or in a cinematic or even a pop song.
That contrast is, of course, also a very, very big part of the entire Alan Wake experience. So it's really cool that seeps into the music as well.
I actually am quite 0 to 1 person. I'm not, how would I say, mellow gray. I'm more like either nothing at all, or then all at the same time. Yeah, all in.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about your career and moving into games. There's something special going on because you're moving on, closing in on an anniversary here, right?
Yeah, actually, I did my first track for Alan Wake. I didn't know it was Alan Wake, but Remedy invited me to do a demo for their new project back in the day, which happened to be 15th of August 2004. and it was the most exciting day of my life, and ever since it's been more or less like a continuous gig with them. But that was very special, and
it's a 20-year journey now.
Yeah, it has been. I've seen the company grow. I've seen people come and go. Luckily, less go. And more come.
More come.
Yeah. Adult entertainment.
Yeah.
But
what happened to that track?
It was shelved from the first Alan Wake because we had to do level cuts because we had to keep the deadline and we had to keep the release date. So 3 levels were cut back in the day, and we tried to return it with the DLC package back then, but no, we couldn't, and we all forgot what I had done, and it sort of got lost more or less for a while.
And then Alan 2 came along.
Yes, and I was looking at the cinematic towards the end of the game where Alan is about to do quite a similar thing than what he did in Alan Wake 1, which was sacrificing himself for greater good. In Alan Wake 1, he jumped off the cliff into Cauldron Lake, and with Alan Wake 2, he was driving back to Bright Falls as Alan Wake. He had sort of found himself, and Scratch had jumped from his mind into Casey and done all kinds of awful things. And there was the pacing of the cinematic sort of. It was the first thing that caught my attention. It was like similar arcs in the road and similar pacing with the car. In the previous, Alan Wake 1 cinematic, which was my test, it was like a flying thing, and here it was driving thing. And suddenly, okay, this timing could fit into that one, or this one could fit into that as well, and this one, and so forth. Little pieces together, and then I had to return the original project file from my backups and change a few instruments and press play. And next thing I knew, I was in tears because it fit in there almost perfectly. I just had to redo something towards the end because it was paced differently, but approximately 80% of it was.
So it's a wonderful sort of full circle, 20 years, the application demo to work with the Alan Wake series is now in this fantastic scene towards the end. So I think we're gonna close up with that scene. Petri is getting on a train to Kastrup to fly away, so we're not gonna do a Q&A, we're gonna get him on the train. But before we run the clip, let's give a really big hand to all the great work and to the fact that you've come here to Nordic Game.
Thank you.
So let's run the clip of the demo song brought back to life in Alan Wake 2. Thank you for listening, everyone.
If Scratch had brought the dark place here, this would take me back inside. In 2010, I had dived in, a leap of faith for Alice, with no idea that the cost would be a nightmare worse than death. It had taken me 13 years to get out. Now Alice was dead because of me. And I was gonna make that leap again, this time knowing the cost all too well. Another way to look at it, I had brought the dark place here with me. I never had gotten out. Maybe after this I finally could. It was a fool's hope. I had no choice. I had to do it. That didn't make me any less terrified. Fuck it. This is not what I expected.
Dark ocean